pleasure for me to welcome you to the second phase of the GMRG 2020 annual meeting. I'm looking forward to working with you and achieving a very, very successful GMRG 6. And I hope that in the next few hours, we can improve your interest in joining us, working with us, and achieving that objective. Marcio, you're on.
Thank you, Clay. I would like to welcome you all to our second session of the annual meeting. It is an honor and a privilege to serve as the new president elected of the Global Manufacturing Research Group and to share this annual meeting. It is also a tremendous challenge amidst the pandemic times. We need to devise together new and scientific, rigorous ways of launching the sixth round of survey data collection. And for that, we definitely count on each one of our dear GMRG fellows to use our creativity and scientific rigor in setting new paths for empirical research. Over 1 year already elapsed since our 2019 Washington meeting, and what a year was this one. Among our priorities for 2020 and beyond, we have the launching of the sixth round of the survey, presentations of methods and results in congresses such as DSI 2020, ICOM 2020, 2021, POM, Euroma, among others. We also envision the launching of small projects including new research methods, experiments, simulations, case study research, and outreach to industry, consultancies, and academics. And during today's sessions, we'll be talking about those small projects and also outreach activities in special sessions for that. And of course, we are looking forward to continue publishing our research papers in regular and special issues from top-tier journals in our discipline. On behalf of the GMRG community, please feel welcome to the second part of our 2020 annual meeting. Thank you, Gok.
Yeah, thank you, Marcio. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Again, welcome to the second meeting of GMRG. My name is Ade Goke from Arizona State University. We look forward to a very interesting and engaging conference and discussion. And I would like to ask if anyone has or had any outstanding questions from the last meeting. Please feel free to put that in the Q&A section of the webinar. Otherwise, we're going to have some time later on today to have an open discussion of any outstanding issues and questions. So with that said, I would like to hand over to Teresa, who is going to talk about different media for data collection. Teresa, over to you.
Okay, I think we had like one question that was unanswered.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so I included it here from Swati. We basically responded to all other questions, so maybe we can address this one.
Thanks, Robert. So I think this question can actually go to Teresa or Tom Call. So does any one of you want to take or answer this question?
I believe Teresa's trying to answer this. Teresa, but we cannot hear you. You're not muted.
It's the setting in your audio device. No, we can't still hear you.
Tom, do you want to take it?
Yeah, I can. This was this is a part of our, and we had essentially a survey flow chart that provided the methodology for respondents versus informants, and we're paying very, very close attention to the most up-to-date concepts regarding the difference between the key contacts, key informants, multiple informants versus multiple respondents, and when we need all those three. In this case, we have an instance in the survey where we only need one key informant, and that's shown in the previous session. We showed Teresa went through a flow chart, and every data collector will be debriefed on that. And there are instances where we need multiple respondents and instances where we need multiple informants. So depending on the constructs and the questions being posed, there are instances of all three of those. So the answer to the question is not exactly to this question here. It actually is different, and it's based on the survey flow, but there will be multiple respondents at some point needed in certain modules.
Thank you, Tom. Teresa, are you on? Did you want to add anything to that, or?
I think that, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right. I think that I apologize, Thomas. I was a little distracted trying to figure out my micro talking. So I think that it is not that there are going to multi-form require find module for each of the modules, two module, the culture and module. I think we're asked 5 depends on the module. How?
Thank you. So again, just flowing next to you now, Teresa, to make a presentation on the different media for data collection.
Sorry, Goki, there's another question. It's in the chat. When are we having the final survey instrument? This is from Ricardo. When are we having the final survey instrument, and when are we starting the data collection?
Where is it?
Right. So, I mean, I can answer that.
Please do.
So the final survey instrument, we are working on the pilot testing now. And we cannot move to a final survey instrument until we have enough pilot testing done. And we're doing at least 2 versions, at least in 2 languages, in the Portuguese and in English. And I believe now we are at some pilots, and data is coming in from Italy. So, and I don't recall if that, I don't know if that was translated. I believe that, correct me if I'm wrong, Teresa, that was in English.
Yeah, the Italian, they're currently collecting data in English. But the other kind of complexity to that is we're also collecting data in 2 different ways, which I'll touch on when I.
So our hope is that the target is by the end of this year, beginning of next year, we will begin data collection. End of this year is probably that's the target right now. So I guess it'll be the end of in November or December.
And I feel more optimistic about that now that we've started to pilot tests. Previously talking about when, it was hard to say because response is back on the pilot test. We have getting feedback to work with now, so that's excellent.
And if anyone on this call is very anxious to get started, we depend on you to do a pilot. And we will contact us. If you can run a pilot, the more pilots we have, the more confidence we have, and the sooner we can begin.
And let's send the call to Brazilian Portuguese speakers as well, because the pre-test for the Portuguese version of the questionnaire is underway. And we are enrolling for volunteers for pre-test the Portuguese version of the questionnaire. It's ready in Qualtrics platform, and we should be starting the data collection for the pretest soon.
I would just follow that up with, if you're interested in doing the pretest, you can send an email to me, and I'll work with you to get the links. And so for the English version, for the Portuguese version, Marshall would be the contact. Is that right, Marshall?
Yes. Okay. Just send me an email, and we'll be setting up the access. And I will send an email to Teresa, and then we set up the access for Qualtrics. But that's fine. Please just send me an email for those that would be willing to contribute to pretest in Portuguese version question.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions?
We have
Thank you, Ricardo.
Ricardo, yes. Thank you, Ricardo. He just said he will volunteer to run a pilot. So I feel like we're in one of those sessions where we should be clapping for everyone volunteers. Yes, we have another one. Someone needs to ring a bell or something.
You just sold a car, right?
I did have a couple of volunteers from our last out. Yes, it's happened that we had it pilot. Again, now that we've got back from our Italian friends, we'll make some changes based on their feedback, and then send this out for more testing.
Excellent. Okay. Again, if there are other questions, we can always come back to this when we have the open discussion session. So, Teresa, over to you. Your volume is up and down, so you may want to make your presentation.
I had switched on the automatically adjust. Is it better now? Because I just switched that
Yeah,
on.
It's better as you're speaking.
Okay.
Now. Yeah.
So that must have been the issue. I had it to say automatically adjust.
Okay.
Well, welcome from Murray, Kentucky. I'm excited to have everybody here and to walk through what we've been working on with this 6th round of the survey in Qualtrics. So I wanted to just kind of cover the survey distribution options. And so I'm good to go to the next slide. So we can collect data, right? By plane, by train, by automobile. Okay, probably not. That's not how we're going to approach it. So what we are going to do is we're going to start by talking about some terminology just to make sure that we're all on the same page. We have we've talked about how to make sure that we're using a common language just to make our life a little bit simpler. And so a data collector is basically going to be a GMRG member who has access to the survey and is collecting data. Pretty straightforward, okay? The primary contact is going to be the data collector's primary contact at the plant or at the company that they want to collect data from, okay? And then after the primary contact, we have what we're going to call key informants and general informants. We've been working out the language on that because there's some, I guess, Katakivi in 2019 had an article where he talked about the difference between informants and respondents. And informants are people who are reporting on system level constructs and they're not doing self-reporting activity, right? And so a respondent is doing self-reporting activity. And because we're asking about system level constructs, we're going to have informants rather than respondents, if we're going to kind of use the technical language there. As Thomas and I were talking about this yesterday, we realized that we had kind of two different types of informants. We had a key informant, which is someone who needs to be specifically able to answer questions about things like the supply chain or about innovation, right? And so they're going to have a special knowledge that not necessarily everybody in the plant would have. And then we have general informants, which can, again, they're not answering questions about their behavior. They're answering system level questions, but it really doesn't take a specialized knowledge. So I perceive the plant culture and the plant leadership modules to be more general informants. They can go to many people in the facility could answer those questions. Okay, so now that we have kind of the difference in the terminology, let's start to look at what maybe our first option for data collection would be. So our first of three methods that I'm going to go over is just Qualtrics entry from all the way across the survey. And so what that looks like, we have the data collector, the primary contact, the key informant, and the general informants are all doing their own entry into Qualtrics. Okay, so how that looks is, if we could go to the next slide, what happens is that we will be sending individual survey links to for each plant to the data collector. So if you're going to collect 10 plants, we would send you 10 individualized links. And that's something that we just kind of ironed out or identified the concern that we need individualized links when we were working with our Italian friends. Because if we don't have individualized links, then you as the data collector have trouble accessing a specific survey. So we need to make sure we do the individualized links. So those links are going to come from the GMRG leadership team. We're going to forward you the link. The data collector goes into Qualtrics and fills out the initial survey, which includes your information, the plant ID that you're assigning to that facility, the primary contact at the plant, including their email information. And then you end that survey. When you end that survey, an email is sent through Qualtrics. You don't have to do anything. It's going to automatically send it when you end a survey to the primary contact, and it's going to show as from you. So when you enter your contact information in Qualtrics, we utilize that information within the email. So it says, dear so-and-so, here's, the way that the email is worded now is it implies that you've already talked to them about this process. Here's the survey that we previously discussed. Here's the link and again, a brief introduction to the GMRG, okay? And so then that email goes to the primary contact. And again, it's shown as from you, the data collector, okay? Let's go to the next slide. So then the primary contact receives this email from the data collector. They review the welcome email, and then they can click on the primary contact survey link. They go in and they identify the key informants and general informants for each of the modules. So again, that includes the core, the supply chain, sustainability, innovation, leadership, and culture. And so that's their first task. And they can self-identify and say, I'm going to be a key informant for the core module. but we're going to have them input their email address and it will send them a link. The reason that we've opted to do it this way is because I had it originally set up so that they could identify whether they were going to complete a portion of the module and then go on to that portion of the module. But the challenge with that is that none of the links go out to anyone else that they've identified until they end the survey, right? And so there are, in some cases, the primary contact may not be completing any portion of the survey. So we're just going to set this one up to be short, to have the contact information in it. And then it's going to, your plant information, your contact information are going to funnel through this primary contact survey and go on to the module survey. So when the primary contact ends their survey with the contact information for the modules, then an email is forwarded to those key informants and general informants to complete their portion of the survey. So let's go to the next slide. So now let's say, for example, I'm a key informant for the supply chain module. I receive an email from the plant primary contact. So it's coming, it's an email that says, you know, good afternoon. We've been contacted by the GMRG. This is what they're about. I've agreed that we would complete this survey, and then it lists their name at the end. Okay, and so in the background, we're transferring both the plant ID, your information, right, and the primary contact information, and it's flowing through from one survey link to another. So now the key informant at the supply chain has this email. They click on it and open it, and they just are going to their portion of the survey to complete. So they go complete that, and then they end their survey module. At the conclusion of the key informant completing their survey, an email is sent back to the primary contact and back to the data collector to let them know that that portion of the survey has been completed. I'm sorry, could we go back one slide? I forgot to mention something on that slide. At the conclusion of the primary contact completing the survey, an email is sent to the data collector that says, here's the survey modules and the contacts that the primary contact has identified to complete the modules. So now you have, as a data collector, you have a list of, for this plant, these are the people who the primary contact has said will complete these surveys. Then in step 3, so let's go to the next one, when those modules are completed, you get an email that says, yes, that's been completed. So you have the ability to keep up with how much of your survey has been completed, okay? So, all right, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So that all in Qualtrics, kind of more automated, is the first method. The second method is that you could have a hard copy and go to the facility and either hand out the hard copies and have people complete them, or be there and complete them, right? But then when you're finished collecting the data, you would need to come back to Qualtrics, and you're going to enter all of your data in Qualtrics. And part of the reason that we're doing that is because there's some quality checks as you enter the data in Qualtrics, which will keep the quality of the data at a higher level than if we just do Excel spreadsheet, okay? So that's the second method, and then let's look at the third method. The third method is one that I haven't created yet because I want to finish the pilot testing. The third method, I know our EU friends need a survey that's anonymous. And so what we'll do is within Qualtrics, we'll create links to each of the modules that are anonymous. And so then the data collector would need to share that link with the links with the primary contact. And then the primary contact would need to forward them out to the people that they wanted to complete those links, right? Because I know that privacy issues are a real concern there. And so that's one way that we can allow them to use Qualtrics, but not collect any identifying information, right? We wouldn't be able to use the kind of flow through method that we talked about in the first approach, because that captures email information. The one thing I would want to note about that is that when we share the data set, none of that contact information will be publicly shared, right? We're using it for the process of data collection, but we won't be using it in terms of as part of the data set, okay? All right, where does that leave us? I think that's kind of the coverage of those three. If I'm trying to think, how am I on time? Did I Did I exceed my time, or are we about where we thought we'd be?
I think you're just spot on.
I'm spot on. Well, good.
Yeah.
If people have questions, I'll be glad to try to answer them. And we can save that for I think we have an open discussion at the end as well, but that's.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. Thank you very much, Teresa.
Mm-hmm.
So as we all know, GMRG's focus traditionally has been on academia. As we move forward into the future, we're trying to see how we can reach more and have more industry engagement. So the next presentation by Itendra Chaturvedi will sort of highlight some ideas on how to actually do that. Itendra.
Thank you, Goki, and I am going to see if I can. So, Tom, are you running the slide, or do you want me to do it? Either ways.
I think Robert is running.
I'm running the slide. Whatever you prefer, Itendra.
Okay, that's fine. First, thank you very much for having me here. As a way of giving my background, many of you don't know me because I'm very new to GMRG. This is the third chapter of my life. So the reason why it's very appropriate for me also to talk about this topic is because my first chapter in my life started as a consultant. I used to work for Ernst & Young Management Consulting, then A.T. Kearney in strategy, and worked for many companies, airlines and retail and e-commerce and B2B e-commerce, and took many companies public. And then my second chapter in life was I went into industry, so worked for Microsoft for a very number of years and traveled across 75 countries. And my third chapter in my life was I became an entrepreneur. I started 3 companies, and actually this becomes my fourth chapter in life. I have come back, want to give back. So after many years of industry and consulting and entrepreneurship experience, I'm back. And so this topic is very relevant, and there are a few things that I might say pardon, because this is my first time here. So Robert, if you can go to the next slide. Yeah, there you go. 3 things I will cover very quickly, and I will be on time. Industry outreach and its benefits, building blocks. What do we need to do to create this industry outreach, and some proposal recommendations, you should say, on how we can go ahead and execute on this one. There will be a few points in this one that will make you think, and that's the key objective of this presentation. So Robert, if you can go to the next slide. So there are 3 key stakeholders based upon my understanding around GMRG: researchers and data collectors, industry, and GMRG. So for researchers and data collectors, if you do a better job of industry outreach, when I say industry, I'm talking about consultants, industry, just across, a great job at marketing. Be more projects, more consulting, more networking, more money, more intellectual capital for more research and education. For the industry, because we are focused on practical research, this amazing group of international data collectors and researchers, they cannot do it themselves. I was on the other side. They cannot do it themselves. So there's a huge return on investment for their investment that they cannot get internally or through a management consultant. And then the third one, which is a big one for GMRG, is the true vision realization of what GMRG wants to be. So if you can go to the next slide. So we looked at some data, and I looked at some data and say that how many, who's coming and who's interested in what we are doing, other than higher education and research, which form close to about 40% or 45% of the people who are coming to our assets, online assets like LinkedIn and website and so on and so forth. You'll see that close to 30% of our followers are industry, and management consultants are the same size as the research group. So 40-ish% is people coming from outside the industry. So this is a target-rich environment for us, and this is important that we notice that this is real data. So if you go to the next slide, please. So there are a few more statistics that I gleaned. August and September webinars had close to 40% representation from the industry, and the rest was academia. The August interview on intellectual capital and supply chain had 50% viewership from the industry. And then the 2 research paper analysis in July had close to 60% viewership from the industry. The only problem I have noticed is that the percents may look very attractive, but the number of views are very, very low. And that's the biggest problem that we are facing with our assets today. We are like a diamond in the rough that not too many people know about us in the industry. Next slide, please. So there are two key stakeholders that coming out of this data, you look at, there are two key stakeholders that we should be targeting. One of them is consultants, and other is industry. And in industry, we are seeing a lot of people coming to us from operations, supply chain, IT, engineering, marketing, sales, and business development. So consultants and industry, if we can have a concerted strategy around an industry outreach to go after these guys, I think that could benefit GMRG and all of its stakeholders tremendously. Next slide, please. So, but there are challenges. At this moment, based upon my research, there is limited outreach. Our assets are scattered online, and the online assets are based at ASU. ASU has been gracious enough to fund the sites and all of that good stuff. The targeted and comprehensive marketing is missing. As I said earlier, we are like a diamond in the rough when it comes to an industry outreach. So, but there is a solution to this. And if you can go to the next slide, please. There are some key building blocks that we require for an effective industry outreach. It cannot be done as a Band-Aid. So we need to revamp our online assets. We need to do a targeted online marketing effort. We're not talking offline, but at least online. It needs to be a business development and an outreach to the industry, including seminars, events, roundtables, all of that stuff. And there has to be a proper program management and leads management that will be then funneled to the appropriate stakeholders within GMRG. And all of this requires funding. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So the recommendation I'm making here is that there is a need for a revenue model. I've been told that this has been discussed before. So what I am suggesting, recommending, proposing is that there is a need for a revenue model. A revenue model requires a lot of other discussions in order to bring it to fruition, and so the core team needs to have a discussion around the governance structure of a revenue generating entity. And there are many options that can be discussed. What about all the data that's coming in GMRG? So a discussion around the ownership and the rights of the data that comes into GMRG, and very clear service level agreements when you have an entity that is generating revenue. Next slide, please. So the recommendation, my recommendation here would be to core team to work on a revenue model and all of its enablers. It's extremely important. Once as a principle, we agree that that's the right thing to do. And in the interim, maybe, and I'm jumping the gun, maybe Tom and Goki can comment on this, but we can do a pilot as an industry outreach. So ASU can lead in terms of a proof of concept. For example, a management consulting GMRG partnership, where we can be the research arm in an exclusive partnership with a management consulting company. And we can show the results. And while we are working on a revenue model and its enablers, we can also see if there are some results coming out of a pilot. And then if it works, then we can scale it across GMRG. So again, next slide, please. Just reiterating the value proposition, why this is important is because for researchers and data collectors, again, more projects, more consulting, more networking, more money, more intellectual capital. Industry gains a lot by getting this huge brain trust working for them, and GMRG's realization of its vision in a very aggressive manner. Next slide, please. And so the way I'm going to summarize this is industry outreach can be very rewarding to all the stakeholders of GMRG. We have a window of opportunity due to the pandemic, and I don't want to come across as not caring, but there are many opportunities that are coming up. And in this pandemic, the industry is looking for answers. And so we should be there to provide the answers. So we have an opportunity here. And to capitalize on this opportunity, there needs to be some key building blocks. And pilot and scale approach can minimize the risk of any mistake. So with that, I'm going to close. And I believe I'm on time too.
Yes, you are. Hitendra, thank you very much. So I am sure people will have questions because this is new, this is something different. So for now, I would ask you to maybe either post your questions on the Q&A chat, or when we get to the open discussion, if it's something you really want to talk about, please put it in your pocket right now, and then we'll open it up later for discussion. Thank you again, Itendra. Our next presentation is going to be by Frank. Frank is going to talk about posting feedback for companies. Frank, over to you.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. I'm going to talk a little bit about, what we can do with the results in terms of how we can utilize it, in terms of the tool that we can develop to create a benchmarking report, and also about some possible other. Can we go to the next slide, Rob? So I'm going to talk about the tool itself, and I'm just raising or opening the forum up if anybody's interested to work with me on this MDI. Okay. So why should we develop a benchmark tool and the report? So what are the benefits for GMRG and for us in doing so? The next. So I was thinking about the multiple ways in terms of using a tool. So one way is for us as a researcher to gain a quick overview and check data for descriptives, to generate ideas, to have an initial, picture of how if we should engage in testing certain relationships as such. And that can be done numerically and visually through simple descriptives, I don't know, such as ANOVA, things like that. Can we continue? And then also we can use it maybe, I suppose, linking on to the previous presentation to also give or develop reports in terms of giving companies a quick feedback in terms of their benchmarking, or also if we have contacts and gain access to companies through industry association, giving them feedback, right? And point number 4, which is a little bit different than the third one, is to look at the customized feedback that we're seeing. Then if we view benchmark as an individual report, a way to automate it and give companies basically a way to see how they are performing, for example, what practices they are using in relation to their competitors or from a global perspective. Okay, next one. So what we used to have, you can see a screenshot on the next slide that I can't remember which GMRG round we had, a tool like this, but that's what it used to look like. It was an automated Excel tool that we had where you could gain information on high-level mean levels that we have here. Next one. So from a plant perspective, for example, in terms of competitiveness, but also from a global perspective, where we can compare performances across countries. Next one. And also when we look at it from an industry perspective. Now, I think this is quite interesting and useful for us, but also for the companies itself in order to engage with them, but also in order to gain access or to provide them an incentive in terms of why and they should maybe participate in our one. So that was a tool, and the tool then can be used to automate a benchmark report, which could then be purely numerical, but it can also be interpreted for the researchers in each country, depending on what type of feedback they would like to give to those companies. I also put here an option for the possibility we can also use this tool not only to develop the benchmark report, but also possibly if anybody would be interested in further GMRG publications, long time we had no book coming, right? Next slide, please. So the first point I think is quite important to provide the customizable feedback for the companies, and that could be a high incentive for them to participate. So I envision the benchmarking report to provide the information for the companies to see where they are, what improvements they could do, what are their performances in relations to others, how do they compare against competitors within the industry, and they can also use the information to see whether if they, for example, compare high-performing companies or plants, what type of practices they have been using that others might not be in order to improve their performance. And as a caveat to this, I think if we develop this benchmarking report, which I think should, we could also look at it and use it ourselves and publish that towards a more practitioner related. Next slide, please. So that's what I mean with looking at this round. So the book, I was thinking about options of a book. It could be like I talked to George about it, and George told me that George and Tom, you guys are thinking about a method paper and thinking of what we are using a GMRG. This book or whatever book chapter could then be about the results that we have gained through this benchmark report, or it can also be some form of longitudinal tracking of the performances of the companies. I did a paper like this with, I think with Damien once, where we looked at the IMSS data and we're tracking level grade. So here, maybe something like that. I was just shooting the breeze here with the ideas about next one. So yeah, this is my idea for it. So whoever is interested, so we would like to know who's interested in getting firstly a benchmarking tool, and then secondly a report in order to maybe sell the participation in the survey or to fill out the survey, and also who's interested in maybe further collaborating in taking a more macro perspective on our results in terms of a longer. Okay.
Oh, thank you, Frank. Wow, you guys are all on time today, just like we did 2 weeks ago. I think Frank's presentation aligns very well with Itendra's previous presentation in terms of some of the things that GMRG could actually offer the industry. So a benchmarking, report or tool definitely could be one of the things that industry could benefit from GMRG. Okay, so we move on to another presentation. This is going to be by Robert. And again, this is something that I think is new to GMRG, but something that has long been overdue. Robert.
Okay, hello, everyone. Welcome to my part. My name is Robert Wittmer, assistant professor at ASU. And I would like to talk about what we call short cycle research projects. That's a discussion that started basically a year ago in Washington, D.C. And then over time, I had a discussion with George and Ike and also with Tom a couple of times. And, we thought that might be an interesting topic, but we need to kind of formalize it. So that's maybe a first step to do it actually here. So what's the objective? So the idea is, and the question is, how can we leverage the GMRG network? And I'm not talking only about people, but also data and so on, contact information and so on, to initiate additional short cycle research projects. When I'm talking about short cycle research projects, I'm basically referring to, of course, high quality research publications that can be published in a shorter amount. So the focus is on relatively quick, fast-paced research projects. The other issue is, it's great to have that idea. The other issue is how to form research teams effective based on common interests. That's another issue identified. And then, of course, a discussion we also had for a longer time now, what additional methods and topic can we use to complement current GMRG research? And that's, of course, another initiative to increase GMRG's impact. Okay, so what's kind of the value? Now, the idea is, and the question is, how can we use GMRG, existing GMRG data in new creative ways? So for example, other ways to combine different modules with each other in order to conduct cross-module stuff. What additional new research methods can we use to study GMRG data, existing. And that's, of course, to facilitate multi-method. Another idea is, or another objective is to invite GMRG members to participate in additional new, more research projects, or to help junior faculty to get involved in new projects faster. And of course, here speaking one junior faculty, and I find that relatively important because it's great to talk about GMRG, but of course, junior faculty wants to get involved quickly because they have certain requirements. And then, of course, what I mentioned before, the idea of developing research. Okay, so potential directions for short cycle projects, and that's kind of an outcome of a discussion we had the last couple of weeks. The one is, of course, driven by what's going on current theme topics, right? How can we effectively better, faster respond to current events? Of course, right now it's all about COVID-19, but that's not the only topic that is going on. I'm also talking here about Brexit, natural disaster, climate change. Now, that is, of course, attractive because in that way we can respond to call for papers, and you've seen there are many out there, especially related to COVID-19 right now, and I believe many of you working on COVID-19 related papers. Now, doing that ensures high relevance, right? If we are able to address important topics, current topics effectively, now that will help us to gain attention quickly. That's not only on LinkedIn, but also among us. Also, the idea of testing GMRG concepts that we have developed in different modules in different contexts. And another idea that I emphasized last time in our discussion very much, other ways to involve GMRG industry partners for immediate feedback on current topics faster and effectively. I'm not talking about completing another survey, but asking for maybe 30-minute interview in order to get feedback on GMRG related topics on ongoing issues, for example, related. Now, the other aspect is method-focused projects. And here the idea is to facilitate more multi-method research. We're talking about multi-method research for a long time. Now we all know it's relatively difficult to conduct. Now, the idea is here not necessary to wait for the new wave of data to come in. The idea is how can we use existing data in novel ways? That, of course, allows a faster completion of a project. Now, what could that be? Can we maybe conduct simulation studies? Maybe we can use behavioral experiments to test existing GMRG findings. So one method that was presented last time, Tom, you talked about social network analysis, right? So are there, methods like that we can use in order to use existing GMRG data different. Behavioral experiments. One example might be, we all know how plant managers maybe look at sustainability in regular. Now, can we change the context a little bit through behavioral experiments, through scenario-based studies, and study how sustainability principles change in times of disruption such as? Okay, now, great ideas, you might say, but what could be an effective process to actually initiate the short cycle process or projects? Now, I have two suggestions here, and this is up to discussion. So this is not a definite approach, but I would like to suggest it to the group here. The one is, which I want to start today, actually. It's a Qualtrics-based approach, and we have worked on a Qualtrics survey where everyone is invited to participate individually, and you will be asked to propose novel topics that can be studied related to existing GMRG data. Another question will be, okay, what alternative or innovative research designs and research methods pose? Based on that, we will look as a GMRG team on your responses and try to form teams based on common interest. Now, the continuation will, of course, be done in smaller teams. And as I said, that will be done on common interest. Now, with Qualtrics-based surveys, we know that can work, but sometimes it's very hard to follow up. The other idea we had, I believe also in DC already, it's kind of to initiate so-called research incubator sessions. What do I mean by this? So the idea would be to host a incubator meeting. Now, ideally, it would be an actual meeting, a physical meeting. It might also be in these days a virtual. We would discuss, brainstorm different research topics that are relevant and related to existing GMRG themes and data, form subgroups based on common interests. So that would be all done in the virtual session or in the actual physical session. After that, teams will break out and discuss their ideas. And they will not only be asked to discuss, they will also be asked to develop research agendas, which also involves research designs. Now, the follow-up would be teams will be invited to present their ideas. And since we do it as a team and as the entire GMRG group, we invite participants to provide feedback to the teams, and then we'll send the teams away with a to-do list, an agenda. And what is the idea here? If we do that, we hopefully create a high commitment so that teams will work on it on a frequent basis, and that hopefully will lead to these short cycle projects that not only stuck somewhere in the email inbox, but that will be actually completed. Now, I mentioned before that we started developing a survey. Here on the left side, you can see there are some questions related to GMRG and COVID-19, and then some additional questions about existing GMRG knowledge and how we can apply innovative research methods to conduct. So this survey will go, I believe, through a couple of rounds of feedback. When we are done with it, we invite all GMRG members to complete the survey and of course participate in a new novel short cycle project. You can of course provide feedback to me, or you just send an email to our GMRG group at gmail.com email. I invite you to participate in this discussion and also provide feedback. And I already thank you in advance for participating. So that's basically my little summary of
Excellent.
idea. And I'm also
excellent. Thank you very much, Robert. We're already having some comments on the presentation, on the idea. It seems that this is an idea that would definitely fly. This is something that a lot of people are showing interest in. So that is great. We could talk more about this idea when we have the open session. Okay, next is the outreach program for coordinators and GMRG. And I'd like to call on Thorsten to give his presentation.
Hi, everybody. My name is Thorsten Döring, Buffalo, New York. So I work for Damon College. I manage the MBA program there, and I'm also faculty at Minerva at KGI. And let's take a step back and think about actually who are potential target groups. So this slide here shows probably most, but if you have additional ideas, why don't you put this right now in the chat or just unmute yourself and just shout out if something is missing to make this a bit more interactive. So we have academics that for data collection or research, the last two presentations, academics for teaching as well. So that could be also something that GMRG could provide, right? Such as video repositories or cases or stuff like that. Then practitioners, that was one full presentations. Students, Robert touched a bit on that. And then we have also associations with other organizations. So there is something through Thomas with Globe, and I also saw that the recent DSI email GMRG was mentioned in there. I thought it was quite cool. So is there anything else that we should consider here at all? So just taking a step back, I mean, who should or could be involved with GMRG? So if you have any ideas, it would be appreciated. Okay, otherwise then next.
Wow, is that, oh, okay.
There was somebody, okay.
You're right.
All right. So which platforms are we using? So the website is currently being remodeled. It looks very nice. We have to add more and more up-to-date content to this as well. So looking more similar to other similar data collection efforts like IMSS, I think was it called, right? The website, for example. So that's a great basis. I mean, that really can help us to drive traffic. And then we have had a LinkedIn group, which is more internally oriented, where we actually have data collectors and researchers. They can discuss issues there and connect with each other. So this has been going on for a while. We have about 113 members in there, and fairly new in January, I think this was started. We set up a LinkedIn page. So that was also done through Thomas Cull and Swati, so his, I guess, student. And this page, we will see a few stats on the following pages here. So has created already a bunch of traffic. So we have 200 followers, and this is more externally oriented. Okay, yeah, thanks. Next one. So we have here page views, right? Obviously, it started in June, and then in July we had about 100 page views. August a little bit less, maybe everybody was on vacation, but it looks like a pretty good start to me. So there was quite a bit of traffic. Okay, next one. So then we have impressions here. Impressions is something LinkedIn specific. So this is a certain time, a certain proportion of the screen was actually used for looking at GMRG posts. So that was constantly going up. That's a pretty good start. And then next one. Then we have here company size. So this might be also a bunch of universities in there. I mean, we would have to dig a bit deeper to actually analyze this, but it looks fairly normal distribution, right? So we have quite a few employees from larger companies, and then also some smaller companies or associations here included. Okay, next. So by industry, higher education, and then we have consulting and a few others. So quite a broad mix. It's interesting, actually. We could also dig a bit deeper here after a while, after we have more data to learn about what is actually going on here. But this also provides us actually with the opportunity to look at data, which is interesting. We haven't had before. Thank you. Excellent. So last slide here. I was thinking about what actually outreach initiatives could we sponsor, fund, something like a dissertation award. I mean, I finished my PhD in 2017, not too long ago, and I was looking at a bunch of these awards because it's great to have on the resume, and it's actually, I think, a really good opportunity to get visibility. So could we sponsor something like this, right? The question is, if we sponsor something like this, is there money involved? If there's money involved, where does it come from? So, but in general, I think it wouldn't be too terribly difficult to set up. Could we have a complete session at the DSI? I think we had something like this before, or also other conferences, of course. There are many examples, as you probably know. Best paper contest. So for a specific topic, for example, this would be something in line with what Robert was talking about. Could we sell our data? Question mark. To members that are not involved. I mean, it's sort of would be a change. These are just ideas. I mean, this is nothing that has been discussed or so in a broader. So consultation services for industry that was mentioned. Online training, video resources. I have to dig it up. I looked at a website. There were a lot of teaching resources also from an association. I think it was an international trade association of sorts. And they actually provided a lot of resources for instructors, which I thought was quite nice. Maybe we can do something like this as well. Could we have blogs, right? Where actually there is constantly new information, podcasts, and so using some of these channels as well. So if you have any ideas here, anything that is not on this slide or anything that doesn't make sense, I mean, please say so. Unmute yourself right now or put it in the chat. Otherwise, I think we can look forward to having a cup of coffee. And I think that was the last slide, right? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're so right. So correct. Thank you so much, Thorsten. Again, we could see the alignment between Thorsten's presentation and Itendra's earlier presentation. I think at this point, we're going to break for coffee for 15 minutes. And I'll suggest that during this time, think about potential questions or questions that you have based on the presentations that we've listened to. Because when we come back, we're going to go straight into the open discussion session. Okay, see you shortly. Thank you, Robert. Okay, welcome back, everybody. We're going to move into the open discussion session now. We have about 20 minutes, and we have some points to sort of stimulate the discussion. Basically, we discussed research and mission. Before we go into that, I'd like to call on Marcio. Marcio would like to say one or two words. The call for case study research and the special session for GMRG at the DSI in November. Marcio.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Go. Just in a short notice for all our friends at GMRG, we are organizing a special session at DSI in November for there's two panels, one that will be coordinated by Thomas Cole on the results of GMRG 5 and some research results, and a method session that I'll be coordinating that will be talking about some new initiatives that are underway that is very close to what was presented by Robert on the small scale projects with the development of protocols for case study research based on the GMRG modules for the survey research. And so this is an open call for all of you to attend and participate on this special session that will be held then at DSI in November. It will be a virtual meeting this year for DSI, and the open invitation is there for researchers interested in case study research. Please join the wagon with Robert, and let's make it a concrete start for a group of researchers interested in different methods. And this is a continuation of what was discussed in last year in Washington in the annual meeting. And this is some initiatives were taken by the Unicinos University in Brazil, the PUC-Rio University, and University of Münster in Germany. And this work is underway. So it's just an open call. Please, those interested, just send us a note, and either to Robert, to myself, and let's join it and start to get some exchange on our research community about case study research, apply it to the modules of GMRG6. That's basically what's Gok, and thanks for opening the floor for it.
Thank you. So we're going to go live with the proposed changes to the vision and mission statements in a minute. But before that, please, if you have questions regarding the presentation on outreach plans by both Itendra and Thorsten, the GMRG survey, any outstanding questions you have about that, as well as the presentation by Robert on the new ideas relating to research, short cycle research, research incubator, please, this is the time to ask. You feel free to raise your hand, and they will call on you to actually speak. Okay, I have a question on the Q&A. Somebody wanted Frank to elaborate a little bit more about the possibility of joint research that he mentioned. Frank, do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, no, I wanted to ask, or maybe get back to the ideas from Robert. Especially, I was thinking, what's your idea, how you want to initially find the small group?
Yeah. So I think, I presented kind of this two-step approach, starting with the Quadric survey, which is good to kind of get an idea what the general interest is, which is good, but in my opinion, rather ineffective to form teams, right? Because in order to form a team, you need to have an idea, people need to get excited about it, otherwise they will not follow up. And so I feel this incubator session would be a great follow-up to the Quadric survey. So if people complete it and we have a good number of people, I think what we could do is create a virtual research incubator session. So it's purely about research and discussing ideas, and then hopefully, to kind of identify 3-4 ideas. It depends, of course, on the number of people so that we can form as many teams as necessary, right? I mean, you want to have probably for, I would say, like 15 or 16 people, you probably want to have 4 topics, right? And so ideally, you can create as many teams as you have people. And then I think the other step is what was really important is to make sure that the team is on the same page. Everyone is working on that idea. Everyone knows what to do, and everyone has a to-do list, right? Because usually we're all in different places. And so it would be important to kind of create this first initial step, right? The first 2-3 slides with the research design idea, so that teams follow up and start working. So I think that's the key, because that's the junior faculty perspective, right? I had with many of you good discussions about great ideas, what we could do, but then I feel always this kind of follow-up is difficult. And with this incubator session, the separate session, maybe that is the starting point to actually push an idea to the point when you set up weekly meetings or bi-weekly meetings and start working.
No, I think
so that's my vision.
It would be good, like finding a date, creating breakout rooms, and then making these teams of, I don't know, whatever it be, 3 or 4 people, and then working together a couple of hours, and then afterwards they meet again. And that initial kickoff, I think, can be done one Friday afternoon.
I agree, and this is what exactly I feel would be the right starting. So, and this is, kind of, I don't know if any one of you participated in the CHASM meeting by Dr. Choi, Tom Choi, and Kevin Dooley. They do something similar, right? And from a junior faculty perspective, to me, that were the 2 most productive research meetings I ever had, because you go into a group, you start discussing ideas to a point where everyone feels committed. That's why I put that word before in there, and then you start working on the idea. So that's why I think it could be really helpful to get more researchers involved, especially the younger folks like that, need new projects.
So I can attest to that. The cousin model has been very, very effective, and a lot of top-tier publications have actually come out of that model. So introducing something like that to GMRG or in GMRG, I think would be great. Especially now that we know that we can operate successfully in a virtual environment. I think it will be possible to do that. Okay. Let's see.
And I think
Francisco just mentioned that, and I think this is a good idea, that they can offer a session at the IJCI EOM in Rio next year. So maybe a tag-on session to move this robots idea forward. She has that in the chat. I think that's Robert. You want to read it and maybe respond to that?
Yes, great idea. I think we can exchange emails and continue. And just as a follow-up, as Frank, I think the first real step is, let's send out the survey. Let's see who is interested. Let's see who is on board, and then we have a good email list, and then we can start the initiative. Probably kind of the virtual.
Just one point regarding the ICOM conference in Rio. That will be in February next year. I'm sharing the conference, and we'll be very interested of getting some presentation on GMRG during ICOM. It's very likely that this conference was postponed from July this year to February next year, and it's very likely that it will be a remote conference as well by February next year. But we'll continue discussing that internally at GMRG, so to organize some sessions, GMRG sessions during ICOM next year.
Yeah, great. So another radical idea that we listened to earlier was the one by Itendra on industry outreach. So we're asking for volunteers, and I see, oh, great. I see Francisco already agreed to be one of the volunteers to help move this forward. Excellent. Frank has indicated his willingness to help as well. So this is great. So does anybody else have any comment on any of these key points that we have up here? The survey, any outstanding questions regarding the GMRG 6 survey? There's a poll that is in progress right now on the vision and mission statements. I would like people to just take a second or 2 seconds or 3 seconds to have a look and respond to the poll. Okay, I see a lot of communications being exchanged in the chat forum. The floor is still open for a few minutes more. So,
okay. Shall we share the statements? The vision and mission.
Yeah. Let's do that.
So, because we cannot vote on something if we don't see it, right? So.
Okay. I thought that was Okay. I got it all wrong. Wow.
Can you see my screen?
Can you increase the font a little bit?
Like this?
Well, then we won't see it. Yeah, like that.
This is good.
Can we?
Okay, so first part, propose vision statement 1 versus vision statement 2, and the poll should be open.
Yeah, so we have to become the global thought leader in data-driven research and practice of global manufacturing supply networks of the future by capitalizing on a unique asset of vast multinational community of researchers, industry practitioners, and other global manufacturing stakeholders. Wow, it captures everything. And the second one, GMRG is an organization with a guiding philosophy described below that is built on a set of core beliefs and values, all leading to our main purpose and mission. So please feel free to.
Where do we vote? I see this.
I think there's a poll. Yeah, Robert, do you want to?
I think attendees. It says attendees are now viewing questions. I'm not sure if we can vote actually as panelists.
So it's only for attendees.
Panelists? Yeah, let attendees vote. Yeah.
Oh.
Can we see the mission as well?
Yeah. Shall I move on? Maybe we can leave it just for 10 seconds and then we move on.
Yeah, 10 seconds.
Because the mission statement will be a little bit more overwhelming.
I actually have the vision and mission statement poll, so I don't know that that's accurate, that it's only for attendees.
Oh.
So can you see it?
I can.
And can you vote?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, go ahead then.
Even the members can do that.
Okay, I will.
Okay, you can move on to the mission statement now.
Okay, so we have to separate it. So first, the first one, it's longer. So okay, let me see if I can.
It is going to be smaller this time.
Okay, does this work?
Is that all the 4 points on the mission version 1? Are those all the 4 points?
Excuse me, sorry.
The 4 points, is that all for version 1?
That's the 4 points are all part of proposed mission statement 1, and then below there is a mission statement 2.
Oh, okay, I get you. Yeah,
so it's
that was my question. Yeah,
both are long.
Okay.
So let's start with the first one, proposed mission statement 1 here, and then in maybe 1 or 2 minutes we can move on to the second.
So since this is an open discussion, do you think we could? I mean, just a question. Do you think we could give people more time to look at this and vote offline rather than just force people to vote now? I don't know.
You know, I have an idea.
Yeah.
How about to turn this into a Google Doc and then allow people to actually comment on it? So this way you get a little bit more detailed feedback and not just yes, no.
So a Google Doc right away, you want to make it live, or you want to send it through an email to everybody?
I mean, we cannot handle the comments now at this meeting for sure. But, you know, Teresa, Tom, what do you guys think?
In follow-up, it's probably better.
Yeah.
I think that, making it a Google Doc and allowing people to comment is a good approach. And again, to do that via an email to everyone, and then we're just able to see their comments after the fact.
Okay. Excellent.
Okay, I will move on to the second one.
Okay.
And
Scott has a chat. Anyway, we're gonna save the chat. Scott has a comment. Perhaps point 2 can also. So we could take that comment and put it somewhere, Swati, as part of the feedback from GMRG members on the statements.
I am just reading on the Google Doc.
Okay. So if you remember to take the comment that Scott just gave and include that somewhere. Okay, just a reminder to everyone, we are going to be sending these statements to you by email. So please take some time to have a look and feel free to provide your feedback. And we should be able to wrap this up sooner rather than later. Okay, any other comments before we close the open session? Any other comments, questions on any of the presentations that have been given today? Any suggestions on the outreach plans? Any questions about those? Okay, like they say in the UK, everything is hunky-dory then. All right, let's move on to an important part of the meeting. We have GOM editors visiting with us, Tyson, Browning, and Miko. Would like to...
Greetings. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Tyson.
All right, I'm going to try to share my screen as well, if that's okay.
Okay.
If I have permission. So I need permission.
I will.
So, Robert, you need to maybe stop sharing. Swati, do you want to make that happen?
I'm
excellent. Yeah, good.
And I don't know, possibly Miko will need permission as well in a moment. I have his slide.
Actually,
his are in his own background.
So. Background, yeah.
Yeah, so he doesn't even need permission. He's better equipped than I am.
Okay, the permission is given to both of you.
All right, wonderful. Thank you. Let me start here, and I will be handing over to Miko in a moment. It's a pleasure to be here with you, and thank you for the invitation to share a little bit about not only Journal of Operations Management, but more specifically about some of the methodologies that we are looking for and how we expect those to be done. So from what I know about your group, you're doing quite a bit of surveys, but I also saw that you are doing some interventions. And these are 2 methodologies that we welcome at JOM, but we do have some guidelines that we think are good to share regarding them. So I'm going to start with a very quick introduction to Journal of Operations Management. I know many of you know about it already, so I'm going to make it quick. These slides will be available if I go too fast, or I'm, of course, always happy to take your questions. Miko and I both plan to leave some time at the end for questions. And JOM, Suzanne de Trevelle, and I are co-editors-in-chief. She's in Switzerland. I'm in Texas in the US. And we are an operations management and supply chain management journal that looks for academic papers that also have practical relevance. Unlike some journals, we are empirically focused, meaning we don't publish pure analytical models. The journal's 40 years old now, just celebrated this 40th anniversary last month. And otherwise, as far as this empirical focus, we're very open to diverse methods and theories. And if there's a good reason to use a method, we are open to it. We don't categorically reject methods. JOM is one of the top journals in operations and supply chain management, but also even more generally in the field of management overall. And as of 5 years ago, JOM has a departmental structure. We currently have 11 departments and 20 department editors. I'll show you the list of those in a moment. And that allows Suzanne and myself to take a more general view of journal strategy, overall operations, and similar things. However, Suzanne and I do look at all initial submissions and all final decisions. Our current list of departments and department editors, you'll see that most of these are topical. However, we do have a couple that are methodological. One of these is the fifth one here, intervention-based research, IBR. I'll mention more about that in a moment. And then the other is the top one here, empirical research methods in operations management, where our other presenter here in a moment, Miko Ranko, is one of the co-department editors. The sole department editor for a couple of years until just a couple of weeks ago, Guanji Shang joined him. Our editorial process at JOM is a little bit unique in that after you get used to looking at this, which looks really complex and convoluted initially, it's really not too bad, but you see that the manuscripts come directly to either Suzanne or myself, and we'll either assign it then to a department or make a decision ourselves, or another option we created is to send it for what we call a pre-review methods check, which is one of the particular roles for the methods department. And Miko has done probably close to 100 of these over the last couple of years, I would imagine. And so this then could come back and then...
I would say it's quite a lot of more than 100.
Okay, yeah, I expect it's been quite a number.
Yeah.
Once Miko has himself or brought in some others to help do methods checks, they come back and we'll decide to sometimes send it on to regular review, but more often than that, ask for a revision before it would do that. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. There's an editorial that explains all the gory details if you're interested, but I will mention quickly that the top reasons we have for desk rejections, and we desk reject about half of the submissions we get. Either people don't realize JOM's an empirical journal, so they're sending us analytical models or optimizations, that sort of thing, or it's just not in the OM field well enough. It's something that should be in policy or economics or something else. Of course, some submissions just lack quality and rigor. Others don't make enough of a contribution for JOM. And then others haven't checked themselves against overlaps, similarities with other published sources. And plagiarism detection software is used now by most journals to check submissions. And we advise authors to self-check before submitting so that they can see where their wording overlap. Always put anything you take from another paper, even your own prior papers, in quotation marks to help with this. It's okay if it's formally, explicitly quoted, and of course cite things appropriately. But this insufficient contribution is one where once Suzanne and I have assigned a paper onto a department, often the department editors are even in an even better position to make this determination, as they're especially familiar with their particular area and what it takes to make a sufficient contribution there. We've put out several editorials over the past several years. This one highlights the most recent ones, both general ones and departmental ones. And I will call out this intervention-based research editorial that came out just a couple of months ago in the journal. Call your attention to that, since I've seen some of you mention doing intervention-based research projects. So this editorial goes through example papers, talks about what the journal's looking for to make a good contribution in an IBR paper. And otherwise, we've got a number of methods papers that are both general and then specific to particular methods. Mikko Ranko, our DE, has been involved in several of these. You see one in particular here about survey-based research that I would call your attention to, as I see that's a heavily used methodology. So that gives some excellent guidance and a lot of references as to some of the common pitfalls and dangers in survey research design. And then related to that and other methods, common challenges like endogeneity. We've got a couple of recent articles about those. And you see we've got some other articles on experiments and on intervention-based research. Have a more methodological and example-based forum article from late last year. And then, of course, a number of articles on case studies in operations management. So this gives you a quick overview. When you get these slides, you can click on these links, go to these papers, and get more information on all of these. So that's just a quick introduction to the journal, to some ideas about our departments, our review process, our methods. And at the end, I'm happy to take more questions if you've got them. But for now, I want to give the majority of our time to our department editor, Mikko Ranko, to give you more detailed discussion on some of these methodologies. So Mikko, over to you, and I will stop sharing my screen.
Thank
so
you.
that if you see Mikko in your gallery view, you can go and choose to pin video and make Mikko full screen, and there you will see him and his slides in the background.
Yeah, we have a nice studio. There are office buildings, so I like to use this when making presentations, and we get the slides on the background with the stuff that we have here. So it's thanks for inviting me to give a talk, and this talk is basically a shorter version of a talk that I gave at the academic management meeting. If you want to see that talk, it's on YouTube. If you search my name or on Journal of Operations Management, you'll find it. And that's about an hour and a half. And I'll try to cover the same things in about 20 minutes. So I have to pick what I'm going to talk about. And I will tell you a few things about a few of the problems and how to avoid them. And these are problems that we have identified during the methods review that Tyson mentioned. And I'm working on an article where we go through all the letters that I've written based on the method review and some of the review report, and what kind of problems we identified in the articles that were either rejected or were asked to be revised. And we have basically 6 broad categories of things that we covered. And justification, how you justify your decisions, that's one problem area. Quite often people justify things based on saying that this is a convention of doing so, but not all conventions are things that should be followed. There are bad conventions as well. Then we have lots of rules of thumbs. So instead of looking at what the particular number in your analysis means, researchers just find a cutoff from another paper or a book and then say that this statistic is over the cutoff, therefore the results are great. Then endogeneity is something that articles have started to address, and there are good articles that Tyson mentioned that you can take a look at endogeneity. Then interpretation is something that researchers struggle with. So beyond saying that something is significant, which basically means that there is some kind of different or some kind of effect, we should be looking at whether effects are meaningfully large and what a particular effect looks like in a particular context. And how we justify our techniques, check their assumptions, that's a 5th problem area. And then common method variance is the 6th problem area that very frequently comes up in methods review for art. So you can all see me well, right? Okay, I'm gonna take a look at more detailed look at this first one and the last one. today. So I'll probably spend most time on this one because there is a nice way of making a point, and here I just point you to resources that you can study. So why is justification of techniques a problem? Well, this is something that I got, and I think this paper actually is being published now or close to being publication ready, but this was the initial version that I got, and this is just a screenshot where I blanked out the variables so you don't know what this paper is about or who are the authors. But this explains a procedure called two-stage least squares, which is very commonly used to address endogeneity in econometrics. It's a basic technique, and it's very common in OM research as well. And so what's the problem with this explanation? The problem is that this is not actually how the technique works. So this article explains the technique that they apply incorrectly, and they may also apply the technique itself incorrectly. We don't know. We don't know whether this is just a reporting error or whether this is also an analysis error. But that's not my main point. My main point is that how is this technique justified? And where do they get the idea that this is how two-stage least squares work? Well, this article cites by 2016, Wang 2016, that are both published in Journal of Operations Management. You can see the citations here. And when we look at these actual papers, they contain the same exact incorrect explanation of the two-stage least squares technique. So whatever you do, you probably shouldn't be taking methodological advice from empirical papers, because they have not been checked all for the correctness of methods, and they may not be correct. So just by focusing on what others have been doing might not lead you to the right. But more importantly, where did these Bai and Wang, I don't remember which one is which one, where did they get the idea that this is how the technique works? So where did these guys get the idea? Well, if we go and we check how these cite, this is the unpublished manuscript that says Bai and Wang, and well, this is Wang cites Bai, and Bai cites Shou and Li, and Shou and Li cite Hamilton and Nickerson, and this is actually a paper about methods. So this is actually a pretty good paper. The problem with this paper is that it specifically says that it does not discuss a two-stage list. So is this really how we should be justifying our technique? So it resembles like the children's game of broken telephone on Chinese whispers, where someone says something and then people whisper it to one another. Instead of looking at the original message, it gets distorted. And this is not the only place where this happens. So this is a big problem, because it's possible that one empirical paper has read an idea, or authors of an empirical paper have read an idea from a good methods piece. So there's a good idea in a methods journal, and then the empirical paper just cites it a bit carelessly. Like now we have the original citation to the Nickerson paper, which says that it doesn't talk about two-stage. And then when others who write for JOM, what do? Do they actually go to the Nickerson paper that is the original source, or do they just cite the JOM paper? Well, they cite the JOM paper. And then these JOM papers start to cite one another, as we saw, and then this becomes institutionalized. So this is the way how two-stage least squares should be applied. And this obviously is not an ideal way of doing it. And so why would this be problematic? It becomes even more problematic because then it institutionalizes the incorrect use of the technique. So basically, when reviewers check papers and the papers explain their methods, they compare it against the past practice, and the past practice is incorrect, which means that if someone tries to publish a correctly done two-stage least squares analysis in the journal, reviewers say that no, this is not the right way of doing it. And this has actually not happened, not with this technique, but other technique, where reviewers say that your technique is inappropriate. See this empirical paper who points out that this is not the way to do it. And the empirical paper, of course, is not correct about it. And this is something that I want to address in our forthcoming paper. Like, how do you justify your choices that you make? How do we prevent this spreading of bad practice from one paper to another? And there are a couple of different things. This is an excerpt from the paper that we're working on, but more generally, instead of looking at what others have been using in the past for justification, we should be looking at there are like primary sources, good books about methods. So instead of looking at techniques and saying that this is a technique that has been used in the past, therefore it must be useful for the purpose, we should be justifying our choices by saying that method X has been proven to be something in some context, or simulation studies have shown that method X works well in a particular context that resembles the context of a study, and not that someone recommends a method or that someone has applied a method in the past. Instead of citing empirical precedent, you should cite methodological sources. So if you want to use two-stage least squares, just find a good book about econometrics and then read that book, and you find the page where it discusses two-stage least squares. Cite that instead of the previous empirical practice, and that will stop this misapplication of text. So, and importantly, when you cite the book, put a page number there so that others will know where to look at. And also, if you put a page number of a big econometrics book, then that proves that you have actually at least seen the book enough and read it enough to find the page number, even if you have not studied the technique yourself. Then another thing that I would like to point out about this example is that it would be very nice if authors would publish their analysis file. If not on the journal website as supplementary material, then at least give them to the reader. In this case, we don't really know if this is a bad application of two-stage least squares, or if it's a correct application that has been just explained incorrect. If we had the analysis files from the authors, we could easily see what they actually did and whether it's a problem in reporting, which is not as serious, or an analysis problem. The incorrect analysis, if they did it like they explained, the results will be grossly misleading. So they are not even close to being correct if they actually did it like that. I would think that most people apply two-stage least squares and other similar techniques using the routines by their statistical package instead of doing regressions by hand like they explained that they did. So, but this is definitely not a problem that is limited to operations management. Here's an article from Industrial Marketing Management, and this is an article about how to deal with endogeneity when you submit papers to this journal. And this is what I was referring to when I told you before that this kind of bad practice, once it spreads into applied in the empirical papers, then it becomes institutionalized into the discipline. So in industrial marketing management, the editors are now saying that when you write papers, consider endogeneity and apply two-stage least squares incorrect. So this journal is telling the authors to apply techniques incorrect. And the reason why this happens is that people look for past practice instead of taking a course or taking a good book about these techniques and then citing that book for evidence instead of citing the past. So this is one of the important things that I want to emphasize, because this happens a lot. And I just rejected a paper recently from the second round where I saw bad analysis practice, and I pointed the authors that this is a common practice, but it has been debunked in this methods paper. Then the authors came back and added citations that this is a common practice. And just saying that something is common does not invalidate the claim that it has been proven not to work. And so instead of looking at past practice, look at what is the actual evidence behind the method. It's of course more difficult. Past practice is useful for getting ideas. So if you look at past research, it's probably done correctly. It's not guaranteed that it's correct, and it's certainly not evidence for the correctness of a method. But generally, people tend to use useful methods, and they tend to use them correctly. So if you want to think of like what are the three things that I should consider, choosing the three most common things or three most common methodologies from the journal is probably a good starting point. And then you read a bit about them, and then you cite good books about those methods to justify your decision. And that will eliminate a lot of problems in the article. So this is the first thing that I wanted to talk about. The second thing relates to survey-based research. And the second thing is common method variance. And this was highlighted as a problem or something that authors should address by Guide and Ketokivi about 5 years ago in an edit. And briefly, method variance means that if you ask two questions and then you calculate their correlation. You ask them in a survey. There's an argument can be made that those two items, questions, don't actually correlate because they measure two correlated constructs. Instead, they correlate because they have been measured using the same measurement. So there's quite a lot of evidence of for example, priming it. So the order of the questions matter. If you ask a positive question first, and then you ask a neutral question next, people are more likely to answer on the positive side of the neutral question than if the neutral question was preceded by a negative question. So the actual way of how you measure things affect the measurement result. And sometimes this measurement method can create spurious correlations in the data. And this is generally known under the umbrella term of common method variance. This is something that I would say every survey-based paper at least must mention. So either you have to explain why you think that it is not a problem in your study, or you have to do some diagnosis. I will not talk about how to make sure that method variance is not a problem beyond saying that using different methods for different variables would be a good idea, or having different informants, or having time delays like 2 surveys and that kind of. Those are not very common. The most common way of addressing method variance in the journal is by using different statistical techniques that you apply after the data has been collected. And these techniques can be categorized into techniques that detect and control. You can find this kind of classification in various articles. I'll just go through it briefly, and then I'll make my point. So correlation techniques basically are you realized after you had collected the data that there might be some method-related correlations that you need to diagnose or possibly control for. So the correlation-based techniques don't require anything in the actual research design or data collection stage, but they're simply applied post hoc after the data has been collected. And this is basically the only thing that you can do if you did not think about method variance prior to the data collection. And there are different techniques under this category. Then we have marker variables and measured technique. And these require that you consider method variance also already in the research design. Briefly, marker variable is a variable that you collect the survey question that measures an unrelated thing. And the idea is that if you, for example, ask the informant whether they like jazz music, yes or no, from 1 to 7, and then you ask everything else on a 1 to 7 scale, you can infer the effects of the common scale by looking at whether the person's attitude toward jazz music correlates with the other measures. Because typically, what kind of music preferences you have should not correlate with any operations management phenomenon. And this allows us to some level of control for method variance. Another variant of these techniques is that if you think that your survey questions are affected by social desirability bias, you can add measures of social desirability to your research. Then we have multiple methods techniques. This I've never seen, or very rarely I've seen these in operations management research. Basically, it means that you collect the same data using different techniques, like you have an online survey, and then you have a pen and paper survey. And finally, some researchers have suggested that we can use instrumental variables, which is the same kind of technique that we apply for endogeneity problems to deal with method variance as well. But this is also something that I've never actually seen in practice. Now, what's the point of presenting all? The point is that these techniques are all pretty questionable. They can be categorized under questionable techniques and impractical techniques. These instrumental variable techniques are impractical because the idea of a survey is that you collect data using a survey because there is no other way of collecting data. If you had objective data, then you would use the objective data and not the survey. And to have a valid instrument, it must not be contaminated with method variance, so it must come from some other source than your survey, if the survey is the method. And that's typically not feasible. These multiple method techniques, there are problems that I will not go in this presentation, but they're also impractical because how would you collect the same thing using a pen and pencil and online survey? That's just very costly. Correlational techniques, these are questionable because the problem with these techniques is that they can be shown to work in simulation designs when you have very large sample size, but outside very ideal conditions, these just just fall apart. And this is something that current research on these techniques does not really explain well enough. It relates to identification, and it relates to the fact that when you try to explain the same correlation with a correlation between constructs and the method, that is most commonly not an identified model. And this is something articles mentioned identification problems, but they don't really explain. So this is a bit less questionable. So with marker variables and actual measuring the sources of method variance, you can actually do some statistical adjustments afterward, even if you have a method variance problem. So this is something that you should go for. I will not have the time to fully make this argument, but I'll give you a link to a playlist on YouTube here, where I spend like 2 hours in various shorter clips to explain why the marker variable technique is the only feasible technique out of. So this gets pretty technical, because the problem is actually a technical problem in these correlational techniques. So what should you do about method variance? Well, the best way is to avoid the problem in the first place. If you think that asking the same question, asking all your items using a single format, single time point from a single informant causes correlations that are spurious, then split the questionnaire into two and ask one set of questions from one person, another set from another person, or have a time delay between the surveys, or collect some objective data, or collect data with other techniques than survey, and that will avoid the problem. Use different kind of scale form. Instead of asking if the company is doing well or not, ask specific numbers and then compare against competitors. That kind of things. Just don't use the 1 to 5 or 1 to 7 scale for everything and expect it to work well. So multiple sources are the best. And then another thing that is highlighted recently in this article by Spector in Journal of Management is that you should really consider the expected effect. So what is the thing that drives the correlations? Is it social desirability? Is it item priming effect? And this, of course, requires a lot of thinking before you do the actual survey, but that's pretty much the only way you can actually address this problem. So which effects are present in the study, item context effect, priming effects, and so on. These are explained really well in this rather long paper by Podzakov, which is still valid. The techniques that they address some of them are obsolete, but the actual mechanisms still work. So go through these papers and consider the different mechanisms for method variance, and then follow Spector's advice on how to model the actual mechanism. Then check the evidence. If your survey scales have been shown to be problematic for social desirability, then that is something that should be reported. Also, if you have evidence that social desirability bias does not affect your scale, well, good for you. Should be reported in the paper. And then make informed decisions, evaluate the impact based on the evidence. So these are points that Spector makes, and this is a very different take on method variance from anything else that has been published in the recent years. And it's very much worth reading if you want to do survey study. The correlational post hoc techniques simply don't work. So if you don't think about method variance prior to the data collection and what you do about it, it is very unlikely that you will be able to properly address reviewer concerns about method variance, because these correlational techniques are simply so problematic. So markers, multiple indicators are best. So this is the list that we have. We have a paper that we are writing, hopefully we'll submit by the end of the year to Journal of Operations Management. And I went through method variance briefly and justification of method, because I think those are issues that have been not addressed properly in prior research. The others are to some extent. So do's and don'ts, final slide. What should you do? Well, when you submit, consider the scope of the journal. We publish empirical research on operations management. Research questions should be important and interesting. Maybe some boring and interesting and important work would be acceptable as well. Justify your choices not by saying that this is how it has been done in the past. Instead, say that, well, this econometrics book says that this is a good technique for this purpose, and then you go. And make sure that it's clearly written. So quite often, when we don't understand what authors do, then that's going to be a revise or reject. If it's a revise, then you have already spent one of your revisions. Typically, articles don't go to a fourth revision. So if you have revised your paper 3 times and it's not good enough, then it's highly likely to be rejected. Don't ignore common method variants. Don't ignore indigeneity, and don't justify your claims by saying that someone has said that this is a good idea or that someone has done this in the past. All right, I had 20 minutes. I guess I went 5 minutes over time. Now we have the questions, right?
Yeah, thank you, Tyson and Miko. So I'd like to open the floor to questions. If anyone has a question for Tyson and Miko, thank you so much for the excellent presentation.
Yeah, you can view a longer version of the presentation if you click on here on the YouTube link. That's my YouTube channel where I upload all my presentations. And there is the version that I gave at AOM, which I had twice as much time as now. And I also talked about other from the list of.
Great. Any questions?
I have a question there, Goki.
Yeah, go on, Tom.
All right. Again, Miko and Tyson, thank you very much for joining our small but highly motivated group here. We really do appreciate all this, and I really enjoy the fact that you take the view of trying to suggest what's practical. It's nice to see that perspective. The one thing, and I'm glad we're catching these thoughts now, and we really look forward to your article, because we're still designing our GMRG 6, going through pilot studies now, and so we really look forward to integrating. And I do think that we're trying to be intentional about the marker variables, but I think social desirability needs to be in there. The one just a curious question about, we know we've seen a lot of issues with survey-based designs. Are there also articles coming out on issues with secondary data? In particular, the issues with using financial report as, the accounting journals have known for a while that there's problems with just the fact that the accounting standards can influence whether or not the results are really what they are. And we know about accounting gimmicks and whatnot. I'm just wondering if there's anything in the horizon about issues with secondary data and how we can start being more informed about that.
I'll quickly say that I'm not aware of an article about that on the horizon. Mika, how about you?
I'm not aware of article specifically about that, but I can point to a good article about ratio variables, which is one of the problems in accounting data, that when you have the same, asset is often used as the denominator. And if you have the same denominator in multiple variables, then that causes spurious correlation. So there's an article in Organizational Research Methods called Divide It We Fall I think it was by Serto and co-authors. And that's useful. We don't have anything coming up. We will address that issue with maybe one paragraph in the paper that I mentioned that I'm working on. And this is just, we went through published papers in JOM, and we found one or two papers where the result could be simply explained by the fact that this is how accounting math works. So if you have the dependent variable and independent variable, and they are depending on one another because of how accounting works, then you can't really say anything except that there exists a correlation by definition. And it does not, if something exists by definition, then it doesn't really tell us anything about the real world. Yeah, but
you're absolutely right, Tom. Secondary data is becoming more and more prominent across the board in empirical research these days. And especially as it becomes so much more prevalent, so much easier to get. Sometimes big data are questionable in terms of their cleanliness and so forth. And so I agree there's a lot of issues there, and it's probably time for such a paper. If you know anyone who's interested in writing one, we would welcome it.
I will. I'll go around and beat around the bushes to see if anybody jumps out.
But yeah, we're aware of a number of issues there. It's just that we haven't come to the point yet where we've tried to write up a methods piece about all of them.
Yeah, I just reviewed a paper about databases for organizational research methods, and that paper was rejected. So there is some interest in writing about these problems, but that paper was not good enough.
Great. The guidance from JOM and getting ahead of it before this telephone game occurs with the secondary data would be great.
Yeah.
I like that Chinese whisper. That's good. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Any other questions? Okay, I think I'm going to hand over to Marcio to bring this conference to a close.
Thanks again, everyone.
Yeah, thanks. Have a nice weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Marcio, you're muted.
Always. Okay, thank you, Mike, Nico, and Tyson for your presentation. And I would like to thank you all for attending. As Tom just quoted, a small group but highly motivated group of GMRGers. Looking forward to get our 6th round of the GMRG survey somehow around this next year, early next year. Let's hope for, in those very unusual pandemic times, for launching an international survey on this scale is a really challenging one. As I said that in the beginning, it challenges our creativity and rigor to collect the data for the survey. And we are really looking forward to get other research methods combined with survey data under the GMRG initiative. I would like again to thank you all for attending, all of the panelists, all of the efforts that was put behind scenes by Robert, Swati, and all of these great folks that make it possible for us to be presenting this second session of the annual meeting, virtual one, and be looking forward to continue working with the GMRG community during this and next year. Thank you very much, and we are closing our annual meeting. Thank you all.
Will Tom also like to say a word or two?
Yes, please, Tom.
Oh, I thought I could just sit here and smile. I believe it was the wisdom and the words of Professor Clay Weibark, who said, "Ask not what GMRG can do for you, ask what you can do for GMRG." So I think we live and breathe on volunteerism, and one thing about GMRG and bringing Tyson and Miko on this is just one example of what our mission is. One of the elements of our mission is to bring the best practices to the community, the GMRG group, and spread this throughout the world. We want the entire OM profession to rise with us, and we do that by our outreach and by our commitment to bringing knowledge to you. So we welcome any thoughts and suggestions from you in the future for more ways in which we can provide. I mean, if we're gonna post Miko's YouTube videos sooner than later, and we've been trying to get more and more of that out there to everybody. So keep letting us know what we can do for you, and please reach out and see how you can help us with that mission, because we need all the help we can get. The whole community does. So thank you again for everybody who's here today. You're now the disciples that go out and spread the good word of GMRG. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.